Yeah, well, okay, it's a touchy subject. I'm a New York Jew. It's very disturbing to me. What I wrote was it's very disturbing to me that so many of the big cheeses in the lawfare mob are Jewish lawyers.
Yep.
And I don't pretend to understand what their motives are. We can superficially understand, their connection with the Democratic Party
Right.
and its putative purposes right now at this point in history. But even those are, to some extent, kind of incomprehensible,
Yeah.
because they appear to be trying to wreck our country.
Hmm.
And uh, I've concluded that there's something in the zeitgeist which really is a term that means the spirit of the age
Yeah.
that is disordering the minds collectively of groups in our culture and people generally. The net effect of it is that we're unable to construct a coherent view of reality.
Right.
We can't construct a consensus, which is agreement between all of us in this culture about what's real.
Right.
And that in itself has a tremendously disordering quality on people's minds. I have had countless email exchanges with friends who cannot fathom why they have lost all their old friends and cannot understand their derangement.
Yeah.
And I'm in exactly the same situation. And to me, it's simply another symptom of this disordered zeitgeist.
Yeah.
So uh, I guess what we ought to discuss is, what do you suppose are the motives of people like Norm Eisen and Mark
And with Andrew Weissman, McCord.
Andrew Weissman? Why am I forgetting Mark's last name? Elias, Mark
Oh,
Elias.
Mark Elias. Yes.
Excuse
Yes.
me.
Yes.
Um, and all the other characters who are involved in the lawfare, including Michael Sussman, who was uh, involved in the Durham prosecution last year. He was, one of the go-betweens emanating from the Perkins Coie law firm in Washington, which was Hillary Clinton's campaign law firm. And they were kind of the pivot point between John Brennan's, connection to British intelligence and Michael Steele or Christopher Steele and the Steele dossier and all that nonsense. And so Sussman did get off because he was tried in a DC court with a sympathetic DC jury that didn't want to convict any Democrats of doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
And you have that law firm, Perkins Coie, which is in the middle of the whole thing. Now, sometime in 2023, they basically threw Mark Elias out of the law firm.
Right.
Because he had become too much of a liability. His activities had become too suspect, especially after the Durham trial of Sussman.
Right.
And he started his own law firm. He actually lost some of his important clients, like basically Joe Biden, but he was then signed by Kamala Harris to be her, one of her campaign attorneys. And so he's been out there engineering all of this ballot fraud for the last, 6 or 7 years. I think ever since Mr. Trump's first term, and probably fairly early in it.
Yeah.
Mark Elias and his lawfare pals were out there trying to figure out, especially at the state level, how they could manipulate state legislatures and eventually state governors and other officials who summarily changed election laws even without any legislative approval.
Right.
And made it easier to process, batches of ballots that were where the chain of custody had been lost and there were no signatures. And, He basically went in there and mucked up the election process in dozens of states and has left us, unfortunately, in a situation where the American people don't trust their elections.
Right.
And that's just absolutely appalling. We're getting to a point where there are so many institutions in American life that you can't trust. And they're really institutions that have a tremendous impact on everyday life.
Right.
When people feel that that they can't find fair treatment in the courts, and that there is no real justice in this country, and it's so errant and in your face.
Right.
It's terribly damaging to our sense of who we are in this country, and our national character, and our ability to just continue.
Yeah.
And to communicate with each other and to understand what reality is. And so these are just tremendously damaging things that they're doing.
Yeah.
And, one of the obvious questions from what I have written is, what does it have to do with them being Jewish? Well, I don't know. I'm not really sure. All you have is a long list of people who are participating in this thing. And, it's hard to understand, but it bothers me because to me, I think it gives a big reason for anti-Semitism to develop in this country.
I agree.
And it can happen in any country. It happened in Germany in the 1920s, largely because of the activities of the Weimar government,
Right.
which induced a lot of the same things that we're seeing now, and especially a lot of cultural mischief.
Right.
And so it disturbs me greatly that it's like these high-toned Jewish lawyers are just asking for trouble. Well, of course, misinformation is anything that puts them in a bad light or goes against their agenda, or look, I think it's clear what's going on here. And it's a very, very long trail that goes back to late 2015, when Mr. Trump announced that he was going to run for president. And his opponents sensed big trouble. And so to counter what they sensed to be a big threat to them, they started to gin up all kinds of activities to defenestrate Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
Many of these activities really got underway in earnest when he won the election and got inaugurated. And they started to morph into illegal activities, like the illegal activities of the FBI, the whole Steele dossier nonsense, the FISA court nonsense, and what you see month after month and year after year, and operation after operation, including the Mueller investigation, which was fraught with all kinds of unethical and probably illegal activity.
Yep.
The impeachment, which was insane. I mean, you had a CIA mole, Eric Charmella, being activated by a former DOJ national security guy, Michael Atkinson, who had become the Inspector General of the intel community, right, and who changed the rule that allowed for secondhand hearsay to be admitted in a whistleblower act. And that allowed Eric Charmella to become this pivot point for the impeachment with the help of Adam Schiff in the Congress. And so these all end up into a giant chain of crimes committed across multiple agencies by the upper echelons, the C-suites of all of these agencies. And so what really explains what's going on here is a lot of people who are afraid they're going to be prosecuted and go to jail. And so when they say that Donald Trump is going to weaponize the Justice Department, what they're really expressing is their fear that their crimes are going to catch up with them.
Right. Yeah.
And to some extent, I think it's true. But I don't think it's going to play out the way many people expect. And my own theory is that Mr. Trump, should he win the election and manage to get inaugurated without getting killed, I think Mr. Trump, being known as a deal maker, is going to go to some of these people, especially in the intel agencies, and he's going to make a deal. And he's going to say, look, you're going to have to hand over the information that we want on this particular set of people. And they're going to be higher up people like Comey and Christopher Wray and John Brennan and Avril Haines and other people who are high up in this. And he's going to say, look, we're going to prosecute these people, but we are not going to destroy your institution.
Right.
And that will be the deal. Only there's a catch to it. I think he's going to go back and he's going to disassemble the CIA after he does that. And of course, I think they'll know that that's what's going on. And so, it's going to continue to be a tremendous kind of battle, a tremendous combat between these forces. Right now, the catch for now is that the Democrats who have committed all these crimes hold the levers of power in these agencies. And as long as they do, they probably feel safe, but they can see their grip being lost imminently. And they're afraid that they're going to get nailed. Well, maybe, yeah. I don't, because there's so much at stake, I can't see that they're going to give up exactly, but they may be out of tricks.
Yeah. That's why I want people to know them.
Yeah. Sometimes you just run out of tricks and your string of mischief comes to an end. And that may be what's happening. You can see, for me, excuse me, for me, I thought you could see the initial blunder that Donald Trump made in February of 2017. And it was when the Mike Flynn thing broke.
Right.
And the whole issue was that Mike Flynn had spoken to the Russian ambassador at some kind of a social event where there was a buffet line, and they were in the buffet line together, and he was talking to the Russian ambassador.
Right.
Somehow these people put across the idea that there's something unusual about ambassadors from foreign lands talking to our high officials. That's what they're here for.
Right.
They're not here to go to ball games in Baltimore. They're not here to play golf in Prince George County. They're here to talk to our officials.
Right.
And the idea that that Trump's yielded to that and actually fired Flynn for that, although technically I think he fired him for something that involved Vice President Pence. But that was the gag that the FBI was able to put over on the American people at the time, that Flynn was guilty because he had talked to the Russian ambassador. And, that from that proceeded all of this incredible gaslighting and mischief that once they realized they could put that one over, they could put anything over. But I think there are three groups here that have somewhat different motivations. And, it's really hard to tell.
Yeah.
There are the agency officials themselves who have committed crimes, broken the law, gone against the Constitution, done terrible things, censorship, malicious prosecution of many, 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 many people,
right.
Using federal agents to set people up, J6, all of that stuff, the impeachment nonsense. There's that group of people.
Right.
There are the lawyers who are protecting them. You know, the Norm Eisens and Mark Elias's and Mary McCord's.
Right.
And Weissman.
Right.
And they're doing what you would expect lawyers to do, which is everything they possibly can for their clients, right?
Yeah.
Although, you know, what's also on the fulcrum of all this is the well-being of our republic, of the national interest, of the common good of this country.
Right.
And then there's a third group, which is the media. And their motivations are the hardest to understand.
I agree.
You know, they can't, it's hard to accuse them of crimes of simply misreporting the news and lying to the public. You know, I don't know if they're not they must be protected by the First Amendment. So it's hard to hold them culpable for assisting the agency, the criminal agency people and their lawyers.
Yeah. I think
this is a lot. What's their motive? They're not, unless they're just getting paid and a lot of money for doing this, and they can't all be getting paid, it's hard to understand unless there's some kind of, mass psychological disorder among them. And probably is, because, we talk about living in bubbles. And it's one thing to be in your own social bubble, at home, or your neighborhood, or your social circle. It's another thing to be in a TV network or a studio or a newspaper newsroom where, the bubbleness of it is reinforced.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but otherwise, it's hard to understand the motivations of the media people. Yeah, because of who holds the levers of power right now. And that's why, there's one other element that we haven't touched on in all of this, is there is a certain Keystone Cops element to it, which is that, we maybe assume that a lot of these actors in this drama have superpowers, and or seem to, because they have escaped justice.
Right.
And they've escaped it being exposed for the villains that they are. But there are a lot of mistakes being made now, and just as their crimes have snowballed since 2015, when all this business really got underway, their mistakes are now snowballing as they get closer to losing their grip on the levers of power. They're making more errors, and there's a kind of strange, inexorable sense of this moving forward to, a really kind of intense Goddard-Dameron-like denouement, where these people are really gonna, they're increasing their speed, they're increasing their errors, and they're heading right towards a brick wall.
Yeah. Yep.
And, it's one of the things that I think has produced this kind of strange aura of confidence that you now see in the Trump campaign and around J.D. Vance especially, and around Tulsi and Kennedy.
Yeah.
And the utter desperation that you're seeing on the other side now.
Yeah.
So one thing I would say is, watch for the errors and watch for more errors and blunders. I mean, it's hard to top the error of nominating Kamala Harris, with no process whatsoever involving the DNC or the members, the rank and file members of the Democratic Party. She just appears as a candidate. I mean, what a blunder that was. And, even knowing who she is, they know her. They know she's not competent. They know that she probably has a drinking problem. They know all these things. And yet they nominated her. What a blunder. And you have to wonder, what kind of clownery was responsible for that?
Right.
So, I see a lot of people running around like chickens without heads in the Democratic Party right now. And so I think that'll get worse and probably funnier.
The irony.
That assumes that the Democrats have a majority in the House, which I think is very unlikely. So I think he's kind of pissing up a rope on that one, as they say. Yeah. And of course, he has to demonstrate or prove in some way that Trump actually is an insurrectionist when he has never been accused, nor has anybody connected with J6 been accused of insurrection or convicted of insurrection. So it seems to me that Raskin's gag is pretty hollow. Yeah, and then putting in place the figures who will enable that to happen, like Judge Engoron,
right,
and E. Jean Carroll, right, and whatever number of jurors you need from a New York jury pool who will do whatever the bubble tells them to do.
Right.
And it doesn't take a whole lot in the way of engineering these cases to make them work out favorably if you're a villain. And right, that's what they've done. But what I think that we're seeing now is this phenomenon of more and more just normal Americans waking up to just how insane this has all been. Yeah. And more than that, really taking a stand now and saying, well, we just can't tolerate it anymore. They are, in fact, wrecking the country, and we can't allow that to happen. And they are going to enable Mr. Trump to get back into the Oval Office. And when he does, he's not going to be subject to the same kind of gags that put him out of business the first time.
Right.
And he's not going to let people tell him who to appoint. And it's going to be a different story. And they know this. And they know that, a number of them, whether it's 12 of them or 120 of them or 1,200 of them coming from the DOJ, the FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Homeland Security, right, countless other corners of the government, they are going to be in courtrooms. They're going to end up in courtrooms one way or another. We may even find a way to try them in courtrooms outside of DC.
That would be the thing that we would have to do.
Yeah, but and again, that would be an important, counter lawfare thing to consider managing. You bet. And if there is a majority in the House and Republican majority in the Senate, you may actually see some impeachments, especially of the federal federal judges, maybe Chutkan, who has really misbehaved very badly. Making all kinds of statements about insurrectionists and Trump, and then allowing Jack Smith to have his way with this material.
Yeah.
One other thing that you touched on was our international standing and what's going on internationally, and I do think that Vladimir Putin is playing this very shrewdly. And what he's doing in Ukraine is demonstrating that you can systematically roll back this kind of aggression, really, the aggression of NATO,
right,
and the USA especially. And you can systematically roll it back, put an end to it, and turn the situation peaceful again, and have it. And produce a good outcome, which would be the neutrality of Ukraine,
right?
And demonstrate to the world that should have been the outcome all along.
Yes.
And the unfortunate result of that will be that the U.S. and NATO will be discredited for not understanding that was probably the optimum outcome, all along, and that they've spent 3 years killing all these people for no good reason. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how the actors who produce that fiasco are going to answer and be accountable for that. And that's, the crew you've already mentioned, plus Tony Blinken and right, Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden. I think another thing that's going to happen with Joe Biden and company is that I think Donald Trump is going to pardon Joe Biden as one of his first acts, but not pardon any of his family members. What are we going to do? We're going to get rid of this crew and see if we can repair the country I think there are a lot of people out there who do have a normal moral sense and a normal moral compass. They know where they know that the needle points north, and they know that they have been gaslighted for the last 10 years, and that they gotta fix it. And one of the things we're seeing now that's kind of a hopeful sign is that these unfortunate people in North Carolina who, it's just another act of abuse by the federal government, who are being mistreated by FEMA and either mistreated and or ignored, have taken matters into their own hands, and they're helping to save their own communities. And that's kind of an interesting demonstration project for the rest of America. That executive order you mentioned, what that enables, I forget the number of it, but what that enables is the U.S. military to assist the civilian law enforcement to put down it's so-called insurrections.
Right.
So
militias.
That, if the Democratic Party ramps up its field forces of Antifa and, whoever else this new Palestinian faction.
Right.
If they get them going and burning things and creating violence, then supposedly the army can come in and put down whatever reaction there is to that. So what the scenario I've heard is that they'll get Antifa and the pro-Palestinian troublemakers to come in, go into actually wealthy neighborhoods, have the people in the wealthy neighborhoods respond. But, I don't talk to him on a regular basis, but I think that what he's doing and what they're doing with the Trump campaign is very shrewd. I think it's a very important, it's not just a good look, it's an important look. Because it's putting up a picture of competence and determination and bravery.
Yes. For
the American people to see in a group of leaders who would be worth having as leaders.
Yes.
As opposed to the what we've seen over the last 4 years. Yep. And it's just terribly important that Americans feel some confidence in the people who are running things and attempting to correct them. And especially the fact that Bobby Kennedy has chosen the particular theme that he wants to concentrate on, which he's best suited to do, happens to be an enormous problem, the health of America. I mean, it's not only the obesity and the poor diet and the chronic disease, which is a hugely expensive, it's bankrupting us and it's destroying the medical system.
Right.
But, there's also the whole COVID business and the corruption in the public health agencies that have to be cleaned out like the Augean stables of Greek mythology.
Exactly.
They have to be really flushed out with a giant fire hose. And, he's probably the one to do it. Oh, dear. Well, I'm still dealing with my website being taken down. I don't know if you know this, Mel.
Well, let's talk about it. This is important because I wonder.
It was taken down the day after I did a podcast with you about your new book. And that's when my website was taken down. The host company had me on a dedicated server, its own box, its own computer that was heavily fortified against attack because my website has been attacked a lot. And we got very inconclusive answers from the hosting company about what happened. And my liaison guy, I got two guys who manage my website stuff. Duncan, who does the website business, and Neil, who does the liaison with the host.
Okay.
And Neil is he's basically a cinematographer who does this as a side business. He's in New Jersey. Cool. And the hosting company's in New Jersey, right around the corner from his studio.
Wow.
And he had never, in all of the month that my website's been down, he's never gotten a straight answer out of these guys. And he's a very kind of, semi-Asperger kind of straight on information in, information out kind of guy. And he said to me, 5 days ago, he said, look, I had to come to the conclusion that people came in, took your server away, and that's what happened. And that the company doesn't want to fess up to it. So we're trying to, cobble together whatever archive files we have and put it all on Substack for the moment. I might have to put up some kind of a mirror site in, I don't know where, Kazakhstan, Sri Lanka, Iceland. I think it's James Howard Kunstler at Substack. Anyway, they can go to kunstler.com. We're redirecting them. My site is still able to redirect people to Substack. I haven't missed any blogs since that happened. My blog comes out every Monday and every Friday before 10 o'clock Eastern time. Nice. And it's usually entertaining and amusing and informative.